So we're going to have a great discussion because we have today a real wonderful writer about mimetic theory in Rene Girard, Erik Buys, he's a elected member of the board of the Colloquium on Violence and Religion, and he has a blog where he blogs about different topics related to mimetic theory applied to culture and science, which is mimeticmargins.com. Thank you for joining me, Erik.
You're welcome. I'm very glad to join you. Very honored to be here. Yes.
Well, thank you. Yes, and our podcast here is called Things Hidden, which is appropriate because we're going to get into some of the things hidden in mimetic theory that we need to think about in our time. I want to start off with a quote from Rene Girard's This is a book by Cynthia Haven, Conversations with Rene Girard, A Prophet of Envy, which is recently released. And he says, the apocalyptic future is not something historical. It is something religious. And as such, it is something that you cannot do without. This is what modern Christians don't understand, because in the apocalyptic future, the good and the bad are mixed in such a way that from a Christian point of view, you cannot talk about pessimism. It is just being Christian. It is saying that all of the texts are part of the same totality. In order to understand this, you only have to quote the first letter to the Corinthians. If the powers, meaning the powers of this world, had known what would happen, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory, because it meant their destruction. Because when you crucify the Lord of glory, the trick of the powers, which is the scapegoat mechanism, is revealed. To show the crucifixion as the killing of an innocent victim is to show the collective murder, and to make it possible for people to understand that it is a mimetic phenomenon. Therefore, the powers are ultimately going to perish from this truth, and all of history is simply the realization of this prophecy. Those who say that Christianity is anarchistic are somewhat right. The Christians are destroying the powers of this world in the sense that they are destroying the legitimacy of all violence. From the point of view of the state, Christianity is a force of anarchy. Anytime it recaptures its old spiritual strength, this reappears in a way.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Well, yeah, just dive in. What does that bring to mind here? We're going to talk about heroes today, but I just thought that kind of sets a very nice quote to get started.
Yes. Well, we're going right through to the crucifixion, and what it means, what the sacrifice of Jesus actually unleashes or reveals. And indeed, it is the revelation of the scapegoat mechanism, and it makes it, in a sense, powerless. So what happens is, in the history of religious studies, the sacrifice of Jesus has been compared to the sacrifice of mythological heroes. And some people have said that the sacrifice of Christ is just one more mythological sacrifice. Like, there are so many heroes that sacrifice themselves for their communities, and Jesus is just one more such sacrifice. But of course, there is a big difference, and the big difference is that mythological heroes save their community by destroying something or someone, by destroying a monster, a monstrous enemy outside of the community, or by destroying the monster they have become themselves, or they recognize in themselves. So the mythological hero saves by destroying someone or a group of people, and Christ saves because he refuses to kill or destroy. That's a big difference. So in order for myth to work, for the mythological story to work, the thing that is sacrificed, or the person or the group of people that is sacrificed, needs to be presented as being somewhat familiar, or somewhat it has to do something with violence. So the one who is sacrificed is part of the domain of violence. And what happens when Christ is crucified? So Christ is provoked by is challenged by his enemies time and again to take part in the logic of violence, to take part in the rivalry over power. So when they ask him, is it okay to pay taxes to the emperor? His answer is, give to the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and give to God what belongs to God. So that is Jesus. He does not take sides with the Roman oppressor. If he would have said, yes, it is okay to pay taxes to the emperor, then they could describe him as a collaborator with the occupiers, and then Jesus would become an enemy of Jewish insurgents. If he would have said, no, you cannot pay taxes to the emperor, then he could have been depicted as an enemy of the Roman occupiers. So of course his opponents want to get rid of him, and they think we have this trick question for him. If he answers yes, he becomes an enemy, and if he answers no, he becomes an enemy of some other group. Either way, it comes in handy to get rid of him. But Jesus, he refuses to take sides, and of course, from the perspective of a loving, non-violent God, from the perspective of love, the question is not, are you for or against any given system? The question is, how can we use the system, the existing system, in such a way that that man in general benefits from it, that you create a just society, and so on. So the man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. It's that kind of logic that he follows. So love has nothing to do with a struggle over power where you try to destroy your enemy, and where you try to establish a rule or an order or a peace that is based on sacrifice, on the destruction of some kind of enemy. Yeah. So that's also why Jesus does not say like, okay, so now it's let's establish a new rule, let's establish a new order, and let's just get rid of all the cultural local customs or the local laws or whatever, or the local habits. No, it's not about being against those habits and against those rules, but it's about evaluating those rules, those existing local customs and rules, from the perspective of love, of neighborly love. Do they contribute to respect and self-respect? Do they contribute to the integrity of people, to keeping that integrity intact, or are they used in such a way as to gain power over others? So I'm sorry for this long introduction, but Jesus refuses to take part in this rivalry over power, this mimetic rivalry over power. Maybe we can talk about the reasons why we can say that it is a mimetic rivalry. So he refuses that, and although his opponents continuously try to seduce him to take part in that rivalry. And so what happens when Jesus dies on the cross, what dies on the cross is also the temptation to lure him into the dynamic of rivalry. When Jesus dies on the cross, he can no longer be seduced to take part in a rivalry over power. But the logic of violence can only justify itself when the one who is sacrificed, or the group who is sacrificed, when the one who is sacrificed can be depicted as being part of the world of violence. But when Jesus dies on the cross, he can no longer be depicted as taking part in the world of violence. So, so in that sense, what happens when he dies on the cross is that the violent logic loses its foundation. It is without grounds. So the sacrifice of Jesus is without, it can no longer be justified. So, I mean, sacrifice as such can no longer be justified. Because what is clear, what becomes clear is that violence was the dynamic within the human community. It was not the dynamic that Jesus was a part of. So what dies on the cross is the foundation for the logic of violence. Jesus is innocent of the charges made against him. And at no point in time did he succumb to the temptation to answer violence with violence. It never happened. But what is alive on the cross, and I think that is the paradox of Christianity, and that's also what René Girard has written about the triumph of the cross, especially in I See Satan Fall Like Lightning. The triumph of the cross is that when Jesus dies on the cross, the love that saved Romans and Jewish insurgents from a potential civil war, that love is alive because both Romans and Jews are still alive. So it's kind of this self-giving, this refusal to succumb to the logic of violence, and the logic of non-violent love that gives itself unto death. So Jesus refuses to do violence against himself. He remains the love. He remains the embodiment of love that he has always been. So he refuses to do violence against himself, and he refuses to do violence against others.
Meaning, when you say he refuses to do violence against himself, you mean he refuses to accept the guilt that's being levied against him, right? Is that what you're saying? Maybe there. Or
Yes,
what do you mean by that? Is that what you're
yes,
talking about, or something else?
yeah. It's about that as
He
well.
doesn't
Like,
whimper and say, "Yes, I'm sorry. I made mistake." He doesn't accept the guilt, right? Which would be doing
yes,
violence to himself, right?
yes, exactly. That's the difference with Oedipus, for instance. Oedipus is the victim who believes the story of the community. The community says, yeah, well, he ultimately believes the story of the community. Community says, well, we are punished by Apollo, by the god Apollo. We are punished because you murdered your father and slept with your mother, or children with your mother, committed incest. And that's why the god Apollo punishes us with this plague that we're suffering from. And Oedipus says, yes, everything that goes wrong in the community is my fault. And Oedipus does violence against himself. He banishes himself from the community. He stabs out his eyes, and he goes into exile. So, but Jesus, whatever people say about him, that is not. He trusts his loving Father. He looks at himself through the eyes of the Father who loves him.
So, in that
So,
sense, he has supreme confidence.
he has supreme confidence. But of course, there is a tricky part in this story, because you could also say, so he's this kind of lunatic who is rejected by a whole community, and who believes that he is like the chosen one or something, and he thinks like, okay, even when the world despises me or rejects me, I'm still loved by this higher being. So as a kind of compensation mechanism.
So,
But I
is
think
Rene Girard over intellectualizing a lunatic's delusions?
well, um, I don't think so. I mean, um, well, ultimately, it's actually what C.S. Lewis once said. Either Jesus is a complete, utter lunatic of the most evil kind, or he is the Son of God. And I think ultimately that's the kind of choice that has to be made. But I believe there are good reasons. There are very good reasons to believe that there is something else going on there
Would you
than
say
this.
that there are scientific reasons to believe, or no? Would you not go that far?
Well, I
In
don't.
the sense
Well,
of being able to ascertain evidence to support a hypothesis, to provide
well,
circumstantial evidence to believe, or do you think that's too far to say?
um,
Obviously, not proof. We're not saying proof. We're just saying, is there
yeah.
scientifically verifiable historical evidence to suggest it?
Well, we have the corpus of the New Testament texts. We have the gospel account, and I mean, there is this logic, this crystal clear logic in the gospel account that unravels the mythological dynamic. And by mythological dynamic, I don't mean something from the past, or I don't mean something that only exists in fiction. I mean, those stories, those mythological stories, are representative of certain human dynamics that are still at work today. So for me, that's one of the reasons that I think, no, this is not the legacy of a lunatic. It's so crystal clear. I mean,
It has such extreme explanatory power, right?
Yes, yes. Also, even the compensation is present. The compensation that I was talking about, like when people are rejected or feel rejected. Take, for instance, a suicidal terrorist from whatever tradition or whatever political corner or religious corner. It doesn't matter. But the suicidal terrorist, you could analyze what he does by it basically comes down to often to deep-seated feelings of resentment. Like take, for instance, what ISIS or ISIL, I don't know what you prefer in English, but how they recruited young jihadist warriors was like, okay, you feel rejected and by your community or by Western civilization. And I mean, here in Belgium, if I'm not mistaken, we had 48 jihadis going to Syria in per million.
Wow.
So that we had one of the highest rates of countries in Europe.
Wow.
Higher than France, higher than the Netherlands, higher than Germany. So and the trick was with those ISIL recruiters was like, okay, so you are not respected here. Islam is not respected here. Your Muslim identity is not respected here. So join us. So the thing was, often you had young people who grew up in this society who whose ambitions were built by Western society, but they felt rejected. And then you have this compensation mechanism, like, okay, but even if that society does not accept me, God accepts me. Well, there have been interpretations of Jesus that Jesus could also have been driven by resentment. Like, okay, so I'm not accepted here, but ultimately there is God who is on my side. But
Jesus doesn't kill people on his way out.
That's one thing, and there is the other thing. There are, I mean, the gospel reveals the dynamic of resentment. When the parable of the prodigal son, for instance, there you can see the resentment of the elder son, the son who remains at home and who is who does not accept his father's forgiveness for the other son. And then his father says, but everything that is mine is yours. So you can question the motives of that older son. Why are you staying? Why were you staying at home? Did you want to be the good son? And now that maybe you had the desire for what your younger brother did, maybe you had but you rejected or you didn't give in to that desire because you thought, then I will be rejected by my community, or I will lose my social standing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but the parables of Jesus are full of those kinds of things where the people who are there their virtue is actually revealed as just built on resentment.
So he, in some sense, he prefigures what Nietzsche is talking about with the resentment. How do you say it? Resentment.
Yeah, ressentiment.
Resentment. So
Or
he's almost Nietzsche tries to it's almost like he's foreshadowing what Nietzsche is going to pick up a long time later, right? Which is
of course you also have this parable of the Pharisee in the who prays in the synagogue, or who says, oh God, I am so happy that I'm not like
the tax
all
collector.
Those the tax collector or all those sinners. But that's exactly like, maybe deep down inside he envies some things of the tax collector, but he comforts himself.
I think that's the dynamic behind so much of everything in our society.
Yes. I comfort myself for not being in the position of that tax collector or whoever,
drug dealer or the
right. I'm a virtuous person, and
or I'm woke, so I am more righteous than the person who doesn't speak as woke as I do, right? That's the thing.
Well, there are certain of course, it's like there is a competition going on often, and I mean, and also people could say, but it's not the case with me. I guess it's a challenge to be honest with yourself, and I think Christianity challenges people to be honest with themselves, and truth can be painful. The confrontation with truth can be painful. I mean, I was once, if I can tell something personal, like I was once in love with a girl, and one of my best friends, I never had any intimate relationship with her, but at some point one of my best friends ran away with her, and I remember having, because I'm talking about things that happened a long time ago, so that helps looking back, and I remember saying to myself and to some other people, I have to be honest, I'm glad I'm not with a girl like her. I'm so glad, I'm so happy that he's such, I wouldn't want to be with someone like her after what I heard about her. You try to comfort yourself. You try to make up to believe in this story, to justify the situation you're in.
I think what you've described is what drives, in America, left versus right politics. I'm so glad I'm not a Trump guy, but you really deep-seated want to be kind of like Trump. And then the other side says, I'm so glad I'm not a, decadent liberal, but you kind of want to be cool like the decadent liberal. So you have that same thing going, don't you?
It's like very strange. You see those people like with celebrities. Oh, those celebrities, and they're what is their contribution to society, and they think they are so virtuous, but they are so hypocritical and whatever, and you have all this criticism against those celebrities, and then a month later or so you see that same person meeting a celebrity face to face. And it's like all the things you said about that celebrity, they melt like snow before the sun. It's like all of a sudden it's like, it was a great talk. I had a great talk with him, with Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was very interesting, and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's this admiration that that people feel vulnerable to, and of course, celebrities are much closer now. Also, there is this what Girard calls internal mediation going on.
And that's an effect of the gospel, right? Bringing celebrities closer to us.
Yeah.
Right.
And
because of the hierarchical the lack of hierarchy that's flattening everything out.
Of course, but also of technological developments like social media and stuff has
which
brought
theoretically could not be possible without the flattening of without the lessening of the sacrificial structures the gospel provides.
Yes.
So even those technological effects that are creating that closer proximity between us and celebrities is also an effect of the gospel in some sense, right?
I think so, yeah.
Could we have had Twitter without Jesus? Not that was an essential thing, but
it's a catchy title. It's a catchy title for a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you could say lots about it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to ask you. So Jesus reveals so much of the resentment in daily life in his parables, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So to push back on what I just said, if he was observing it in his own time, how can we say that the gospel has unleashed this era of fluid resentment that Nietzsche describes? Like, if he was observing in his own time and his audience, hopefully some of them understood some of what he was saying, doesn't that mean that fluid resentment has always been with humanity for a long, long time, and it's not an effect of the gospel revelation of the scapegoat mechanism?
Yeah, interesting question. I would approach it from another angle. I often get the question. So, in Jesus, God reveals himself as this reality of non-violent love. Okay.
Right.
So then the question often is, so what about people before Jesus? Were they? Did they know God? Were they capable of knowing God without God revealing himself in Jesus? Well, the same goes with the dynamic of resentment. So what was it possible for people to recognize that dynamic before the revelation? And I guess the answer is 2 times yes, because the dynamic of nonviolent love has been a dynamic, of course, also before Jesus, that people could follow in a way, because of course God is God. God is present in many ways. But what happens with in Jesus, I think, is that since Jesus of Nazareth, we know that reality of nonviolent love is God, is divine. I mean, it's not that we couldn't access the reality of nonviolent love. Of course, people could. But since Jesus, we know that God communicates on a human level from within that dynamic. That is the way he makes himself known. It's like people, we all had this idea of gods who are violent. I mean, from the hundreds of thousands of religions, great and small, that have populated this earth, the divine or the sacred has always been interpreted as something violent. I mean, disasters happening is God punishing us or God punishing humanity for something. for transgressing certain taboos or not keeping certain rituals. And then you have to make the appropriate sacrifice to make things to make peace again. So that you have this violent peace from a violent God. And at some point, not to sound disrespectful, but just to tell it a bit in an accessible way.
Sure.
At some point, God decided, like, okay, this story about me, what you're telling about me, I'm sorry, I'm gonna show myself. I'm gonna show myself as this non-violent love.
Right.
And so so that is what happens in the gospel. We take where Jesus follows this mythological pattern, but reveals that it is based on a lie. Or the gospel reveals that the mythological pattern is based on a lie. That the opponents of Jesus try to justify his sacrifice by presenting him as someone who would destroy his community. And then the gospel says, but he is innocent. What is truth? The truth is that he is innocent. And then we are back to what we were talking about, or what I was talking about what happens when Jesus is crucified. It becomes impossible to justify his sacrifice. So, and then truth is revealed.
Right.
The truth about the scapegoat mechanism is revealed. And since then, it is not, it shouldn't be that easy anymore to deny your own complicity in the conflicts or the violence in the world. But I guess what people try to do now is to be pure again.
Right.
Which perpetuates
the sacrifice.
Of course.
So how do we? Let's try to. I want to go where. I feel like the most effective way right now to make yourself feel pure in culture is the dominating, the impulse to go to the critical theory and things like that. That doesn't, I'm not giving conservatives off the hook. I'm just saying they're obviously, Coca-Cola is not striving to emulate the values of traditionalist conservatives. So we know that that's not where the power is moving in history. So how do we enter into that conversation in a way where we can help not that we're going to tell them that we're better or something, but rather how do we enter into that conversation that is being pushed by critical theory and things like that, and be able to, hey, look, see, we don't want to quarantine the proclivity to oppression into an external identity marker, because if we do that, we're going to miss out on how to stop it. How do we explain that in a way that doesn't come off as judgmental or condemning,
Well, maybe by showing the dynamics of conflict from situations that you are not a part of. It's like what Girard said was, it's difficult to see your own scapegoat, but it's easy to see the scapegoats of others. For instance, there is often this double bind, and then you can say, okay, so I invite you to think about your own conflicts that you find yourself in. Because take, for instance, what happened with the Islamic world after World War I, where you had the shock of modernity, like where the Islamic world, the Arabic world, there were two kinds of reactions. One was, okay, so we should copy the Western powers. We should organize our own societies like the Western society, because what happened? The West, we once had this great empire, and now we are behind the Western power. So we should, that is the example we should follow. And another reaction was, no, the West is like the problem of everything. So one reaction was, if you cannot beat them, join them. But the other reaction was, if you cannot join them, beat them. And so what you had was this double bind. My model, when I have the feeling that I cannot take part in the life of my model, or when I cannot participate in his from his, when I cannot benefit from his privilege, or when I cannot take part in that, so then I get frustrated, and then we're back to resentment. So I don't want what I actually do want. So even being against your enemy is a confirmation of the importance of your enemy.
Right.
So and I think that is what happens a lot in some of today's conflicts and some of today's political conflicts. It's very striking that here in Belgium, for instance, Trump was every day. Trump was in the news. Biden, not so much. So from where this necessity to focus on this enemy, are we really, what are we interested in when we're focusing on an enemy? We're actually we're not interested in the situation as such, or in improving some kind of situation, but we are actually interested in our own identity. We want, so it's like, I always say there are three types of students. You have the student who joins the teacher and who thinks, okay, if I do what the teacher asks me, then I have some kind of power. Then I am this good student, and I get rewarded by my parents and by other teachers and whatever. Then you have like the frustrated student. You have the nerd who wants to be part of the power of the teacher. Then you have the little brat who is actually a frustrated nerd often, who has tried to have these good grades, and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. So he's not valued anymore, or he doesn't feel valued anymore by his teachers. So he looks for the valuation of other people, and so he starts like rebelling against everything the teacher says. So the nerd was not interested in his courses. The nerd was interested in being rewarded, getting some kind of valuation. And the same goes with the frustrated nerd who becomes a brat. he's only interested in getting some sort of recognition or approval by his peers. Oh, he's like he's a daring character. He's a hero. He's a hero because he dares to speak up against teachers who aren't severe in the first place in today's schools. I mean, and then you have this third type of student who does not, and that's the Jesus student. I mean, the student who does not take part in the rivalry over power. It's not about joining the Romans or being against the Romans. It's about, okay, how can I use this system to make myself a better person? To learn, to get more, to gain more knowledge that I can help the world with, so I can make a contribution to the world. So if the brat or the nerd would go to the Jesus student, who is free, who is independent of that rivalry, and they would ask him, whose side are you on?
Teacher or the crowd, right?
Yeah, he would say, yeah, give to the emperor what give to the principal's office what belongs to the principal's office, and give to love, I mean, give to like these interesting courses what belongs to these interesting courses. I mean, I don't care. Are you for or against a grade system? No, the question is, how can I use the system as a means to gain more insight? What does it, because the nerd, he will try to get good grades just because of the grades. They are
want the status.
Yeah. And he's not worried about yeah, he would commit fraud. He would commit fraud to get better grades. I mean, if he could. And the brat, he commits fraud to get just enough grades. So, but they're not interested. I mean, I'm making a caricature, of course. I mean, it's not that. I mean, but of course, and that is what happens a lot. That type of rivalry, actually, people being obsessed by their enemy, and also by the hurt that your enemy does to you. And what Jesus says, forgiveness is actually the refusal to be defined by the hurt or by the violence that you have experienced.
And unfortunately, critical theory is all about defining yourself by the hurt you've experienced.
Well, it tends to go there, yeah.
Because if you have a problem with weight, then all you talk about is body shaming and fat shaming. If you have a problem with your gender, it's everything is defined by how hurt you are because of other people not understanding your feeling.
Yes.
Everything is always about your hurt feeling. It's never about your power. And the only way you can have power within that framework is to embrace the victim pain that you have.
Well. Yeah, and it's a very strange thing. You need the one you hate. You love, actually, you give value to the one you hate. It's a very strange thing. It's like the suicide terrorist is someone who is so afraid of being destroyed by the enemy that he is willing to destroy himself. I don't want to be destroyed by you, so I blow up myself. I don't want to be
corrupted by your nihilism, your cultural nihilism.
Yes. So that's a tragedy. That's a very tragic dynamic, and I think that's what Jesus means when he says, "Whoever wants to save his life will lose it." So if you want to gain approval from other people, what you can do is trying to model yourself according to their expectations. But when you do so, the people do not approve of you necessarily, but they approve of this social profile, this social image that you're projecting.
So is it possible to be rich and famous by following Jesus? Everybody wants to have one of those things. They want to be rich, or they want to be famous, or they want to be socially esteemed as an excellent scholar. I mean, you and I would both love to be perceived the way Rene Girard's perceived, right? Obviously. I mean, it's a great feeling to be a man of history like that. And
yeah,
so we have to be admitting of that and honest about it, but it's like, can you aspire to those things, or not just aspire, but can you become those things in a healthy Christ-like way? Or if you follow Christ, will it always end in your death or poverty or something, persecution?
Well, no, but when you follow Christ, it's the outcome of what you do is not that important.
So it's letting go of the aspiration, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I really think so.
But it doesn't mean you hate if you become wealthy. It's just superfluous to you. It's
a consequence.
Take it or leave it, right?
It's a possible consequence, but it's not something that you aim for. It's not something that, it's like getting good grades is a consequence of my working, or of my study.
Yeah.
But okay, if I don't have good grades, okay, then I go back to my study. So, okay, being paid, getting lots of money for what I'm doing, okay, it's a possible consequence. But if there is a period that I'm not gaining that much money, is okay. It's also, people ask me, I've written a few books in Dutch as well, so they ask me, so why do you write those books? So they're published by a good publisher, okay, but of course when you write about Jesus in a very secularized country like Belgium, and it's not about some sensational, like his relationship with Mary Magdalene or whatever. Yeah, when it's not in the vein of 50 Shades of Grey, then it's hard to get a bestseller. But
right.
I'm not writing. Of course, I'm writing and hoping that lots of people will read something, but
some scholarly people don't want it to be popular because that's a sign that you're low grade intellectual. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing. But it doesn't matter. Yeah. So can you be wealthy and famous and be Christ-like? I guess so.
But it's not because you're obsessing over it. You don't think about it.
No.
You just do a good job.
Yeah.
This leads me to, I want to ask, so you're a school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And what are your ages of your students?
Like between 16 and 18. So
in the dynamic of a school teacher setting, especially when you're in person, I know you guys have been doing more internet because of the thing, but is there, when you come into a new class, are you the scapegoat immediately, or are you an enemy other? Are you an external mediator, or are you an internal mediator? How does that dynamic work?
All those things. Yeah, that's part of being a teacher. There is a crowd before you.
It's the setting of a scapegoat. It's a crowd versus one, and the one versus the many.
Yeah. Yes, and sometimes you're in. Yeah, you're the popular one, and sometimes you're the unpopular one, and it sometimes it depends from group to group. but you cannot allow yourself being guided by the question, what can I do to be popular? Or it's about, I mean, it has to be about the subject. It has to be about the course. What are we trying to do? But of course, it is in a way, it's a good setting, because all those dynamics are at play in a classroom, so you can use that to mirror certain things.
So your class becomes kind of a mimetic social experiment for you every year, huh?
In a sense, yes. In a sense, yeah, it does. Yeah.
And have you ever had a model obstacle in a student who becomes pernicious and, in breaking the authority of your role in the room, or does it never get that bad?
Well,
someone who's just particularly cunning at getting the crowd to kind of disrespect your authority of the room, or does it never get that bad?
It never gets really bad. I mean, most of the time, I cannot complain about my students. I'm sure they can complain about me, because of course yeah.
Are you strict with grading?
I'm a strict teacher, actually. I mean, I can be quite severe, but eventually I hope so, I think so, that most of them, they know that it's not about being severe for the sake of being severe. It's just, I want some kind of attention. I mean, yeah, some kind of focus. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't mean that I mean, of course there are, we can make lots of jokes as well. I mean, it's all, I mean, group dynamics is a very complicated thing, and I'm sure that they have very mixed experiences with me. If you ask one group or another group, or yeah, but it's, for instance, sometimes I say, why are we reading this difficult text? Then I tell them, well, what would you say if for this group I would say, no, we're not reading this text. I'm only reading this text in other groups. How would that make you feel? That's what I say. I'm presenting you. I'm giving you this difficult text because I believe that you are capable of understanding it. It's yeah, and I think in today's education, sometimes we are not respecting our students when we say it's too difficult for them, or their age, or whatever. I've had teachers myself who had a very high standard, and I'm very grateful for that.
In America,
so, yeah.
In America, we have a kind of new attempt to rewrite education in front of us. We're seeing attempts to call things like Shakespeare, white supremacy. We're seeing mathematics. Mm-hmm. Showing your work in mathematics is now considered to be a construct of oppression. Mm-hmm. We're having the concept of merit itself considered to be something that is intrinsic oppression taking place systemically in our society. What do you think of that as someone, as both a teacher and someone who studies mimetic theory?
Yeah, well,
is this inevitable? Is this an inevitable rot of a society that cannot contain its envy and, resentment without the strong structure of sacrifice holding that back?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two things, of course. A meritocratic system. I really believe that a meritocratic system is a good system, of course. But I mean, we always have these in society. There are certain models that are pursued by different people pursuing the same model, pursuing the same having the same ambitions, and what happens is that some people pursue that ambition for the wrong reasons. I mean, if you want to become a lawyer just because of the social status that you gain by that, I mean, I think, and then you see someone of your classmates becoming a lawyer, and you are not becoming that lawyer because you've been extrinsically motivated by wanting to be a certain to have a certain social charisma. Then you have all these things of these dynamics of envy emerging. So it's inevitable when, I mean, people don't just pursue their most inner vocation. I mean, even what is your most inner vocation? We are always our ambitions and our desires are always constructed in part by our surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
So what we value and the way we feel about ourselves is also in part of that construction. So, but I didn't answer your question, of course.
Do you think merit is going to go away because we are not repenting of our envy and violence in the West, particularly, and we're doubling down on it. So that, are we going to go into a society where merit is chased out of normalcy? I mean, that's a terrifying thing to consider. That's not a very that's not going to be a very nice place to be if everybody is selected because of some kind of grievance rather than because they've achieved something.
Yeah. So indeed. So how generous can we be? How generous can we be toward someone who has dedicated his life to solving a certain scientific problem that really contributes to society? How generous can we be? I mean, with all due respect to people, I mean, I think all of us, we all have our own history. We all have our own traumas. We all have our own hurts. And it seems, that just being like an exhibitionist about things that hurt you and your traumas is like something, an easy way to I mean, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but sometimes it's an easy way to get attention. I mean, and of course we all need attention and we all need care for the hurt that we had, but on the other hand, there are so many people developing certain talents, and often despite their traumas. So can we still acknowledge the hard work of some people, or Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a. It's indeed what you say. It's not a healthy situation. This loss of generosity.
Yes.
Yeah, it's also it's a big issue in today's education as well in Belgium. I mean, of course, the best thing to do is to value people. I mean, it is not it. You shouldn't feel ashamed about yourself if you are not suited. If you discover that you're not, you don't have any talent for mathematics. So instead of forcing yourself to, with all kinds of help, to remain in a certain direction, be brave enough to redirect yourself, and be brave enough to acknowledge that you don't have any talent for science and mathematics, for instance.
But see, there's this weird impetus, again, that's driven by some kind of desire to destroy limits. If mathematics offends you, burn it down for everyone.
Yeah.
As opposed to become the greatest poet who ever lived, you know. But if Shakespeare offends you, burn it down. Mm-hmm. You know, you must burn his name down for everyone. Nobody can have Shakespeare if something he said makes you feel less than you want to feel, right? And that's a kind of nihilistic impulse that can set fire to everything, mm-hmm. you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we maintain, I'm not asking for any clear answer here. I'm just thinking out loud. How do we maintain, how do we limit envy without the scapegoat mechanism? How do we prevent it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, or to put the question differently, how to spread generosity, or how to make society more generous. That's the question.
And see, when you say that, people automatically think, okay, how do we get the rich people to give more money? But that's not what we're saying.
No.
That could be a part of it, but it means, how can a poor person be generous to a rich person? That's a weird thing. That's what you're asking is something that Christ would ask of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the Roman occupiers were certainly richer than the people that he was dealing with in his community, and he was always trying to get them to see the same empathy, you know, from them, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
How do we become generous to the rich?
Yeah. But
that's an offensive question only Jesus would make us ask, right?
Yeah, true. Without falling into the idea of karma. I mean, just accept your poverty. No, it's not about that. It's not about accepting your poverty. It's about not being obsessed by the standards of this world, or what this world thinks is important.
Yeah.
It's about that, and being like calm about it.
Right.
Right. But it has a lot to do with forgiveness. Forgiveness is key, I think.
Right.
Because, forgiveness really means like, it's the refusal of that mimetic rivalry. It's the refusal of being defined by the evil that you have experienced, and saying that, okay, so I forgive someone who did something bad to me. I forgive my perpetrator, but that doesn't mean that you reconcile yourself with your perpetrator. It's just that you say, okay, this evil that happened is something that is something that you have to do something with it. I mean, I give it to the perpetrator, and I know that my perpetrator is part of a world where he himself has experienced certain traumas. But I have faith. I believe that my perpetrator, that he is not just a victim of those circumstances, but that he is able to do something about it. That he is responsible. That is also there is a kind of freedom in him. That he is not completely defined by that. So it's not just forgiveness is not an accusation. Well, it is saying that, okay, this evil happened. You recognize the evil that happened, but at the same time we're saying, but you're capable of other things, and I believe that you're capable of other things. So, but the thing, the evil that happened is out of my hands. I give it back to you. I'm not letting my life be defined by you or what you did to me, but you can do something with it. So then it becomes something that, because forgiveness can also be perverted and can also be something to have power over others. Like, oh, yes, despite you doing this to me, I forgive you. Then it becomes something that is used in a power play again.
And you're saying we need to, so there's a wrong way of doing forgiveness and a Christ way of doing forgiveness, right?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Yeah. That's something that's not talked about a lot. Usually people just think the word forgiveness that's the domain of Jesus stuff.
Yeah,
they don't separate it like what you're doing there. That's interesting.
Yeah, they think it's clear, but I mean, forgiveness can be very tricky. I mean,
so forgiveness can be sinful in some way.
Yeah.
No one thinks of it that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
So what is the healthy forgiveness? What's the difference again? I want to just zero in on that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But well, I think the difference is when yeah, you can use forgiveness as a way of accusing a person, of making him feel guilty. But I forgive you. Yeah, I mean, okay, but you use it. Yeah, you feel that the one who is forgiving is using it as something to make the other person feel guilty. Because when you say I forgive you, you also say you did something wrong.
So when you're offering forgiveness the true way, you have to have solidarity with the person you're offering forgiveness to. You have to have empathy.
Yes. Well, you have to show him that
I could have done the same thing to you in the other shoes.
Exactly. And which is a very shocking thing, which can be a scandalous thing. I mean, I know from certain Holocaust survivors who said one of the most shocking things was seeing that that torturer with his family and with walking by the camp, or being a friendly father to his children, and realizing that torturer was a human being. That realization is like so shocking.
That's the same thing for me. I mean, I tell you, I have that problem. Like Barack Obama, he's presented in the media as such a loving, caring father with his daughters. And then when you hear that he was doing the drone strike on, Anwar Awalaki's 16-year-old son with his friends around the campfire, and you think, how is that the same man playing with his fluffy dog with his daughters? How can you not be haunted by that? that you're in the command room saying, strike Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son with his, they're hanging around a campfire. Why? I don't think he should have killed the father, but the 16-year-old son, Barack Obama and John Brennan, and you think to yourself, how is that the same person? I look at you and you're giggling with the dog. Yeah. Aren't you morally haunted every night?
Yeah, but the shocking thing is that you and me, we are like that we are like Barack Obama.
We could do it too, right?
Yeah. We could do it too. That's the shocking thing, and that's why people are so scandalized by Jesus when he says that he who is without sin cast the first stone. What? I am like that adulterous woman? Or I have something to do with, there is a connection, or that's a shocking thing. But that's like love God and your neighbor as yourself. Love God means do not divinize. Is it the right word? Deify,
yeah.
Yeah, do not deify anything. So do not deify your own identity. And if you do not deify your own identity, then you can accept yourself with certain flaws and whatever and weaknesses, which allows you to love the other. So love the other as yourself, as you love yourself. So, and that's the forgiveness. So realize that you are not perfect. Realize that you are not God. And so you can only love the other, and you can only love yourself if you love God. Meaning, if you do not deify anything, if you leave that space open. And so what happens today is there is a lack of transcendence.
Yeah.
There is a deification of identity.
Yeah. You see it everywhere. I'll give you some more illustrations in America's context. You have, they banned Donald Trump because of the January 6th riot at the Capitol.
Yeah.
But you think about it, and Nancy Pelosi said they have polluted our sacred temple. And that pricked up my Girardian ears, right? Because I said to myself, well, what happens in a temple? That's where you decide who's sacrificed. And in Capitol building, that's where they plot together about whether they're going to create an insurrection in Libya, in Yemen, in Syria, everywhere around the world. They go into that Capitol building and they decide who lives and who dies based on which regime is playing ball with their interest around the world. So in one regime, it's very violent. Saudi Arabia, they do violent things, but they play ball with the Capitol. So you don't get sacrificed. You're good. But you go to, Syria, you're not playing ball, you're going to get sacrificed. And they create the chaos at the Capitol. I said the sin for Donald Trump, according to the Washington, D.C., was that he started the insurrection in the wrong capital. If he had started the insurrection in Damascus, they would love him, because if he had fomented an uprising to overthrow Assad, just like they did with Gaddafi in Libya, he would be a hero. So that's deifying identity, that somehow American identity is superior to the identity. What about the feelings of people in other cities? Are their lives worth less? And then the social media companies, they banished Donald Trump from all of the different platforms because he could incite violence. But I thought about it and I said, well, what about all the politicians who've been using those platforms to incite regime change chaos in Libya, in Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen? Aren't those lives matter too? I mean, shouldn't the voices of people in Yemen have a voice about whether, hey, can we ban that politician who keeps telling us we need to occupy, control Yemen? That's a cheapening of life, right?
Yeah. But of course, I mean, it's easy to talk about it from a distance. But the thing is, when you're in politics, I think it's almost inevitable that you that's also something that as a Christian I want to do. Like, it's easy to criticize the opponents of Trump or Trump himself from a distance, but when you're in the game, so to speak, it's so difficult to be clean. I mean, so that's also something we have to recognize, that this world has such a complicated, long history with lots of complicated interests and alliances that shift. And but I mean, certainly there is this metacritique which is important, and which I would like to see more in the debates, in political debates, like this metacritique of people from the left criticizing themselves, or people from the right also doing the same thing. I mean, it's always, that's what Jesus says, love your enemy, and the members of your own household will become your enemies.
Well, so that's if you ask both sides, they'll say, I can't do that because the other side's united. If I criticize my side, we'll be destroyed and killed. They'll destroy us. That's what they all believe. They believe,
if I criticize my side, I will be destroyed by my side.
Yeah.
Also, that's also a thing. Not just the other side will destroy me, but this is something I know when I'm talking about this, that I will be vilified by my own people. So that's, yeah, it's so difficult sometimes to make certain to have certain conversations, because there is such a taboo on certain things. We are not living in I mean, the 1968, I mean, the French, I mean, the student revolts and so on. It was like, it is forbidden to forbid, but now it's like there are new prohibitions coming from all sides. There are so many taboos nowadays.
In our attempt to eliminate taboos, we've created more prohibitions than ever in some sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even comedians talk about they can't say anything. There's, I saw Chris Rock was saying, that there's nothing good out there because nobody can take any risk. Nobody can say anything. Without risk, without being able to take risks, nothing is entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, especially, and that's what comedy does. I mean, it's that kind of ritual that we need
to let out steam, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but also to allow the thing that is forbidden in a way that it is not destructive.
Yeah. The comedian is a kind of scapegoat who performs a ritual acknowledgement of something which, if it was in the ordinary life, could cause a lot of scandal and conflict, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's where you're able to pick up stuff like, women shop. You're like, well, you can't say that every day, but you say that as a comedian and everybody says, yeah, that's kind of true. Or, men are lazy. They just want to watch sports all day. It's like, okay, we can say, you can pick up on, you can amplify differences, right? In a way that does not scandalize in a normal setting if you talked about it all the time, right?
Yes.
So are you, I want to end it by going back to what we started off with, because we talked about at the beginning, your article about the different myths. You have the mythic hero who wants to take out a monstrous enemy outside the world, outside themselves, to save the world. And you say Theseus belongs to that most populated group. Myths with such a hero reflect the belief that the establishment of a harmonious world demands sacrifices. But or who is considered evil must believe it. For some, these are today the unbelievers and their decadent way of life. For others, they are the believers and their beliefs. For even more ethnic minorities or political opponents. Now, that's the second one. The first one is what you said Oedipus Rex is, that he's the one who admits that he is the problem, and he blots his eyes out and goes out of the community for peace. And the final of the mythic heroes is they're willing to sacrifice themselves in a fight against the supposed monstrous enemy. He said Achilles is walking that path. He looks like a blueprint for the contemporary suicide terrorist or the soldier willing to die for his homeland. And then you said at the end that unlike the classical mythological heroes and all the variants, Christ's figure saves others because he refuses to kill. And in his death, Christ not only refuses to destroy others, but paradoxically refuses to destroy himself. He refuses to lose sight of who he really is, in other words. Right?
Yes.
And I feel like in order for us to show this, we have to make art that embodies this.
Yes.
So that's what I want to leave you with is how do we make, just thinking out loud, how do we make art that does not get caught up in those three categories of mythic heroes? Obviously, those mythic heroes are not role models that will serve us well. We need to have art that compels us to think of the Christ approach. So we're not being like Oedipus. The people who are in critical theory, they feel like Christianity feels like Oedipus Rex. You see, the critical theory, they say,
true.
What you're doing is you're trying to get me to, just acknowledge that I am the problem and not acknowledge, and so they're scared of that. Then you have the second one, like you said, trying to go after, kill a monster outside. That's like Beowulf, right? As Beowulf goes off to kill Grendel, the troll. Yeah. And then the third one is this idea of the valiant. It's kind of a merger of the two, right? Where you have, I will die in the attempt to kill my enemy.
Yes.
All three of those are different manifestations of the sacrificial scapegoat mechanism.
Yes.
All three of them are still operating in dysfunctional ways in our time today.
Yes.
In ideology, in art, and film, and so forth. And yet this Christ story is the one that we need to tell in a way that is boldly demonstrating these deep truths that are represented there. And I think that's what's going to help our society navigate is art and stories that embody that Christ figure appropriately,
Yeah. Yeah. And so what is your question, or do you?
How do we do that? How do we make art that conveys that?
Well, I think there already is a lot of art. So yeah. How do we make that kind of art? I don't know. I think I do think that art is really important, but of course we need people who have lived, who have experienced that kind of dynamic in their own lives, even apart from even if they're not familiar with the Christian tradition. I think that the world that is infected by the Christian tradition and that dynamic, it has let bare that dynamic, the Christian tradition. So how to, I'm not sure how. I'm not sure.
I just feel like everybody is worried that there's no good art, right? They can't make good art. And I'm just thinking, how do we create an environment in which people can make that kind of art that heal us, because we can talk about it intellectually and it won't move the culture. What will move the culture is a renaissance of art that gets us to think in those lines of thought. That's my belief. I see a lot of new entertainment emerging, in at least in American pop culture, which is trying to bring out the more vengeance. Vengeance is hot now. You know, you look at well, I'll put it this way. Okay, here's an illustration of this. Star Wars, the original trilogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The ending of the film ends with, you know, the hero Luke, refusing to kill his father, right? Refusing to strike down his father. And his father is moved to repentance by seeing that his son would sacrifice his right to kill in vengeance.
Yes.
And so when that happens, you have this transformation of the situation. At the end of the trilogy of the new Star Wars films, you know, I may be misunderstood, but I believe at the end there's the killing of the emperor. There's no, you see what I mean?
Yeah, but Star Wars is a mixed bag, I think. Also, the original trilogy it's also a mixed bag, because eventually you have this sacrificial solution. But I know that George Lucas, in his comments on the Star Wars trilogy, was really putting forward that mimetic rivalry, and he really had an insight in the dynamics of mimetic rivalry, saying that the Sith and the Jedi are similar in many ways, and I think he made the comparison between the Viet Cong and the American army. I mean, two rivals, saying that from the perspective of one party, the other is the devil, but from the other side, it's the other way around, of course. So, and I think Star Wars really shows that, but at the same time, Star Wars kind of says that it's kind of an inevitable cycle in society. I mean, it's something that humans always must go through. So you have these rivalries, and then one side wins, and then you have this sacrificial peace.
Right.
And then so it goes on. It's like this tragic cycle, unending cycle. So the thing is how to make grace, how to give space to grace. And there are attempts in Star Wars.
Yeah.
The example that you gave.
Yeah. Like you see the
Obi-Wan. But they are at the individual level.
Yeah. Yeah. But the cosmic framework is still in the eternal return, right?
Yes.
Still locked up in that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, obviously, I don't mean to suggest that the original Star Wars is somehow getting the Christian picture right, but it was a mixed bag of sacred and Christian influence. But I wonder, I'm just trying to use it as a measure. Now the new trilogy, maybe I interpret it wrong, but I felt like it's still a mixed bag, but now the bag is mixed more in the favor of sacred rather than Christological Christian. You see what I mean?
I thought so too.
Right.
But then you have in one of the films of the new trilogy, you have the this moment where someone is saved, and it's not about destroying the enemy, but it's about saving your loved ones. I mean, that's also I'm coming not to destroy someone, but I'm coming to save someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, it's too bad that George Lucas was so heavily inspired by Joseph Campbell, and that he didn't read René Girard.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joseph Campbell is really still in that kind of Jungian mythological
Well, here's a
scheme.
question. Do you believe? Here's a good question. Okay, this is just a hypothetical. Do you believe it's possible to make a box office hit film that's Girardian? There's not enough catharsis, right? You know, I mean, in order to make a big box office hit like a Star Wars or Spider-Man or Avengers, there has to be a lot of sacrificial catharsis.
Well,
if you're going to make a proper Girardian movie, will it actually sell? You know?
Well, it always goes just tragedy. It goes to the level of tragedy, but it doesn't go beyond the level of tragedy. Those films. I mean, the Batman films of Christopher Nolan. It's about showing that those mimetic doubles and how they are tragically dependent on each other. The hero needs a villain, and the hero only exists because the villain exists.
Yeah.
It doesn't go beyond that, and it's already valuable. But indeed, to many people, it's more exciting to read mythological stories than to read the gospel.
Right.
And that tells us something about also the power of the gospel.
Right.
In a paradoxical way.
How so?
Because most people, we naturally we like stories of vengeance. The classical story of a little boy who is bullied at school. We all have been that little boy or that little girl who were bullied at school in some way. Maybe not at school, but we all have experienced rejection or fear of rejection or whatever. So, and then to come out victorious by destroying a certain enemy or something. That's something. Yeah, we identify with the hero who had a bad start, but yeah, that's something we want to identify with, and so we like that feeling. We are satisfied by that feeling of heroism and of vengeance, and it's like the most superficial side of human nature is that immediate mimetic side, and also that immediate almost violent side, that aggressive side that we don't want to acknowledge, of course, within ourselves, because we are noble heroes. We are noble in our ambitions, and it's the other side that has it common, and it's just karma, you know. He deserved what was coming to him, my enemy. To really love people, to really be tolerant, and not just tolerant to your own club, to really be tolerant, to really love your enemy. It's like it's not that easy,
and it's rarely depicted in film or anything.
Yes.
Can you think of a pop culture film off the top of your head, relatively well known or well known, that depicts that very well? The Christian story you're talking about of loving your enemies instead of just loving your fellow oppressed people.
Well,
I like The Truman Show. Have you seen that with Jim Carrey?
Yes.
But the problem with that one is that, you know, it's almost there. I think I'm just thinking out loud, you know, he leaves the false prison of this Christoph constructed reality. Mm-hmm. He was an abandoned baby at first, like in the idea of the babies abandoned in the pagan world of the ancient times. but he's constructed this false reality for him, and he escapes it.
Yes.
I guess to make that completely Christian, he would have had to not only escape the false world, but go up to the production room and give Christoph a hug of forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
The producer. That would have
Yes.
been completely Christian at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To go
Yeah,
up and
true.
to forgive him and then say, all right, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Instead, he just leaves, So he doesn't strike vengeance, It's more of a Buddhist, I guess, or I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
A denial
Yeah.
of the false reality of desire, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a reconciliation with the oppressor.
And of course, what we also have is like revealing the revelation of scapegoat mechanisms in film. Like, that happens, but that other side, the positive side of generosity, that's difficult, really difficult to portray.
Have you seen the movie? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's also why there are not a lot of good films about the gospel. When I see a film about from Cecil B. DeMille to the most recent ones about literally portraying Jesus and the gospel, it doesn't really work.
What's the problem you have with it?
You already have to have this theological conception to understand something about what is going on there. But just to show it like that, we need something more sideways, in my opinion.
You need to put the crowd more against Jesus, you think? In terms of the viewer, because most of those movies are always presenting the audience as if they're sympathetic to Jesus all along, which makes them feel I knew you were good all along, instead of making them feel that actually making them feel as if they're suspect of Jesus too, which would be the proper distance narratively to depict the passion, right?
Yes.
It's to depict him in such a way that you kind of agree with his oppressors to some degree, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yes. Yeah. Jesus is hated and rejected, and you being part of the crowd who hates that annoying man.
Yeah. So you would want to present it in a narrative tone in which you can't quite make up your mind whether you agree with his oppression or not.
Yes.
Which they never do.
No, of course, because we know the story, and also what is revealed in the story is also clear.
We're so infected by Christianity we can't even present the story of Christ in a way in which we would have experienced it had we been there. Interesting, right?
Yes. And so we often do not experience Christianity anymore. We grow up in a Christian culture, and we are not really baffled by the story because we know it so well. But actually, it's a really unique, scandalous story in many ways.
Yeah.
And so we should find ways to experience the scandal.
Yeah.
The scandalous aspect of it.
One pop culture movie I can recall that kind of does the Christian thing is the movie I Am Legend with Will Smith. Remember that?
Yeah.
Where they present, it's a cartoonish version of that, but you depict them as these monsters, and then it turns out, oh, they're really happy people. They're okay. These little creatures,
Yeah.
Is that a full depiction, or do you think there's something missing there too? Because if it was so well done, well, how come we don't remember it that much?
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen it, so no. But there's a good Polish movie, Corpus Christi, that was nominated for an Oscar as best foreign movie.
Is that a new one?
Yeah, 2019, I guess. It's based on a real real life situation about a boy who was imprisoned because he murdered someone, but a boy who grew up in like these facilities for delinquent young people, and when he's released, he ends up in a village where he is mistaken for the new priest. So it's his ambition to become a priest, but of course, yeah, the priest in the prison says that cannot happen. But then he comes in this village and he's perceived as the new priest, and so he takes on that role of the priest, and he's confronted with some tensions in the community, and then he takes on the role of mediating those tensions, and of course in the end it also has consequences for himself. But that's a very interesting movie. It's one of the best for me, like as a Christian movie, depicting something of a dynamic that emerges, within all the mud and of human life, but still showing something from another perspective, or that's a really interesting movie. Also because it's a scandalous thing to say Corpus Christi about a young man who murdered someone.
Yeah. But in doing that, that's how you become closer to understanding your own complicity with evil, right?
Yes, that's the thing. And that's also what the movie shows, that in the village everyone is enmeshed in the same problems and is somewhat heir to the problems of the village, and also contributes to the tensions, and that at some point it is revealed to the community, and then you see people who run away from that revelation, who do not want to know do not want to refuse to be honest about themselves, and then other people who understand themselves better and are able to forgive.
Well, Erik, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We've covered so many interesting things to think about.
Yeah, well,
it's been a lot of fun. It always is when we talk. And I want, folks that want to follow your work, go to mimeticmargins.com. Right?
Yeah, thank you. David, it was a pleasure to talk to you again. And I'll keep following you and the podcast. It's really interesting. You're not shying away from controversial topics.
Yeah.
So that's what we need, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on, and I always learn so much when I have you on. So we'll do it again sometime, okay?
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.